Toast ici, Sabukat. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Marcus Chen didn't notice. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he stared at the eviction notice spread across the small diner table, the red letters seeming to blur together through his exhausted eyes. 68 years old, and after building his small flower shop from nothing, he was about to lose everything. "More coffee, hun." The voice was gentle, but when Marcus looked up, he saw the young waitress's eyes were rimmed with red. She couldn't have been more than 22, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and a name tag that read, Isabella. Despite her attempt at a professional smile, tears threatened to spill over. "I'm fine, thank you," Marcus replied softly, quickly folding the papers, but something in her expression made him pause. "Are you all right, dear?" Isabella's composure cracked. She glanced around the nearly empty diner. It was 2 a.m., and only a couple of truckers sat at the counter, then slumped into the booth across from him. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't," she began, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's just been the worst day of my life." Marcus had seen that look before, the same helpless desperation he'd felt when his wife Sarah had been diagnosed with cancer 15 years ago. The same look he'd worn in the mirror this morning. "Tell me," he said simply. The words poured out of Isabella like water through a broken dam. She'd gotten the call 3 hours into her shift. Her younger brother Miguel had been in a car accident. 17 years old, his whole life ahead of him, now lying unconscious in the ICU with a traumatic brain injury. The doctors said the next 48 hours were critical, but she couldn't afford to leave work. 2 jobs, community college during the day, and she was still barely making ends meet for herself and Miguel after their parents died in a factory fire 2 years ago. "The hospital needs a deposit for the surgery," she whispered, her voice breaking. $15,000. I have maybe 300 in my checking account. Marcus listened without interrupting, his own problems suddenly feeling smaller. When she finished, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on Route 95. "What's your brother studying?" Marcus asked finally. "Pre-med," Isabella said, a ghost of pride flickering in her eyes. "He wants to be a neurosurgeon. Wanted to be, I mean. Even if he makes it through this, the brain damage—" "Don't you dare finish that sentence," Marcus said firmly. "Hope is all we have sometimes, and you can't afford to let go of it." Isabella looked at him with surprise. There was something in this old man's eyes, a depth of understanding that went beyond sympathy. Marcus stood up slowly, his arthritic joints protesting. "Wait here." He walked out into the cool September night, the neon diner sign casting pink shadows on the empty parking lot. His old pickup truck sat alone under a flickering streetlight, and in the back, carefully wrapped in damp newspaper, were the last dozen roses from his shop. He'd planned to take them to Sarah's grave in the morning, their anniversary, but something told him she would understand. When he returned to the diner, Isabella was staring out the window, lost in thought. "Isabella," he said softly. She turned, and her eyes widened as she saw the single white rose in his hand. It was perfect, petals like silk, stem strong and green with a few drops of dew still clinging to the leaves. "This is for hope," Marcus said, placing the rose gently on the table between them. "My wife Sarah always said that flowers were God's way of reminding us that beautiful things can grow even in the darkest soil." Isabella stared at the rose, then at Marcus, confusion and gratitude warring in her expression. I can't accept this. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Marcus replied. "I know you're working 2 jobs to put yourself through school and take care of your brother. I know you haven't eaten anything tonight because you've been too worried to be hungry. And I know that sometimes when the world feels like it's falling apart, a small act of kindness can be the thing that holds us together." "But why?" Isabella whispered, carefully picking up the rose. Marcus pulled out his wallet, old and worn, held together with tape, and placed $1,500 bills on the table. Isabella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Because," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was doing, 30 years ago, a young immigrant with nothing but a dream wanted to open a flower shop. The bank wouldn't give him a loan. He was sleeping in his car, ready to give up and go back to working in factories for the rest of his life. Then a stranger, a woman whose name I never even learned, gave him $2,000. Said she believed in dreams, even other people's dreams. Isabella's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different tears. "This is everything I have left," Marcus continued. "My shop is closing tomorrow, but you know what? Sometimes the most important investment we can make isn't in ourselves, it's in someone else's future. I can't take this, Isabella said, pushing the money back toward him. This is your life savings. No, Marcus said firmly, pushing it back. My life was Sarah. My life was 30 years of bringing beauty into the world through flowers. This money, this is just paper. But in your hands it becomes your brother's surgery. It becomes your medical degree. It becomes all the lives you'll save as a doctor. Isabella stared at him in shock. How did you know I wanted to be a doctor? Marcus smiled, the first real smile he'd felt in months. Because you have healer's hands. I noticed it when you were trying to comfort me earlier. And because Miguel isn't the only one who dreams of saving lives, is he? The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and change. I'll pay you back, Isabella said finally, her voice fierce with determination. Every single dollar. I swear on my parents' memory. I know you will, Marcus said. Not because you have to, but because that's who you are. As Isabella carefully tucked the rose into her apron pocket and gathered the money with shaking hands, neither of them could have imagined how this moment would reshape both their destinies. The flower would be pressed between the pages of her anatomy textbook. The money would save Miguel's life and launch Isabella's medical career. And years later, when fate brought them together again in the most unexpected way, that pressed white rose would still carry the fragrance of hope. 7 years had passed since that night at the diner, but Isabella Morales could still feel the weight of that moment every time she walked through the halls of Johns Hopkins Hospital. The pressed white rose, now carefully preserved between glass in a small frame on her desk, served as a daily reminder of the stranger who had changed everything. Dr. Isabella Morales. The title still felt surreal sometimes. At 29, she was one of the youngest attending physicians in the cardiothoracic surgery department, but the path here had been carved with blood, sweat, and more sleepless nights than she cared to count. Dr. Morales, we need you in OR 3, her resident, Dr. Kim, called out as she reviewed patient charts in the break room. Emergency bypass, 45 minutes out. Isabella nodded, downing the rest of her coffee, her 4th cup since her shift started at 6 a.m. It was now approaching midnight, but in the world of cardiac surgery, time moved differently. Hearts didn't wait for convenient schedules. As she scrubbed in, her mind drifted to Miguel. Her brother had not only survived that terrible night 7 years ago, but had defied every prediction. The brain injury that was supposed to end his dreams had instead fueled his determination. He was now in his final year of neurosurgery residency at Mass General, and they spoke every Sunday without fail. Remember what you promised, she whispered to herself, a ritual she'd maintained through medical school, residency, and now as an attending. The promise wasn't just about the money, though she'd kept meticulous track of every payment she'd sent to the address Marcus had given her, only to have each check returned with a note. Invest it in your future instead. The promise went deeper. It was about honoring the faith a stranger had placed in her when she had nothing left to give. Dr. Morales? Doctor. Kim's voice pulled her back to the present. The patient's family is here. They're requesting to speak with you specifically. Isabella frowned. Why specifically me? Who is the patient? Marcus Chen, 68 years old. Massive heart attack at his apartment. When the paramedics found him, he was barely conscious, but he kept repeating your name and this hospital. The family said he's been asking for you for hours. The surgical mask slipped from Isabella's hands. Marcus, the man who had saved her life, was dying, and she was the only one who could save his. Isabella's hands shook as she reviewed Marcus's chart. Triple vessel disease, massive anterior wall cardiogenic shock. He needed immediate surgery, but his age and the extent of the damage made it incredibly high risk. In her professional opinion, he had maybe a 30% chance of surviving the operation, but without it, he had no chance at all. Dr. Morales, a young woman, approached her in the family waiting area. She had Marcus's kind eyes and gentle demeanor. I'm Linda Chen, Marcus's daughter. He told me about you, about what you did for each other. What I did? Isabella was confused. Your father saved my life. I owe him everything. Linda smiled sadly. That's not how he tells it. He says you gave him purpose again. After Mom died, he was just existing. But watching you become a doctor, getting your letters and updates over the years, he said it reminded him why life was worth living. Isabella felt her chest tighten. Letters? I only sent payments, and he kept returning them. Oh, Dr. Morales, Linda said softly. Dad kept every single letter you sent with those payments, every update about medical school, every milestone, every struggle. He has a whole scrapbook. He calls you his greatest investment. Tears threatened to blur Isabella's vision, but she blinked them back. She was a surgeon. She had work to do. "I need to tell you about the surgery," Isabella said, slipping into her professional mode. "It's extremely complex. The damage to his heart is extensive. There are significant risks." "But you can save him?" Linda asked, hope and fear battling in her voice. Isabella thought about that night 7 years ago, about Marcus's steady voice saying, "Hope is all we have sometimes, and you can't afford to let go of it." "I'm going to try," she said. "I'm going to give him the same chance he gave me." In the pre-op room, Marcus was barely conscious, but his eyes focused when he saw Isabella approach. "The little waitress," he whispered, his voice weak but carrying a hint of his old warmth. "Look at you now." "Don't talk," Isabella said, adjusting his oxygen mask. "Save your strength for the surgery." Did I do the right thing that night?" Marcus asked. Isabella leaned closer, her hand finding his. "Mr. Chen, because of what you did, I've saved 43 lives in the past 2 years as an attending physician. Miguel is about to become a neurosurgeon, and right now, I'm going to use everything I've learned to save yours." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "The rose, still on my desk," Isabella said, "reminding me every day that beautiful things can grow even in the darkest soil." As they wheeled Marcus toward the operating room, Isabella made a silent promise to the universe. She would not let the man who had taught her about hope die on her table. The surgery ahead would be the most challenging of her career. But as she stood under the bright oil lights, her team assembled around her, Isabella felt the presence of everyone who had brought her to this moment. Her parents, Miguel, her mentors, and most of all, the stranger who had believed in dreams. "Scalpel," she said, her voice steady and sure. The fight for Marcus Chen's life was about to begin. If this story is touching you in some way, comment where you're watching from. Every place has its own pain, and sometimes it's incredible to see how we all connect through such human stories. The operating room at Johns Hopkins was a cathedral of precision at 1:47 a.m. Under the harsh white lights, Isabella's hands moved with the practiced grace of someone who had spent 7 years perfecting her craft. But this wasn't just another surgery. This was the man who had taught her that miracles sometimes came disguised as strangers with flowers. "BP dropping to 80/45, announced Dr. Kim, monitoring Marcus's vitals. "Dr. Morales, his heart is barely pumping." Isabella's eyes never left the surgical field as she carefully dissected around the damaged coronary arteries. The extent of the blockage was worse than the imaging had shown. 30 years of running a flower shop, lifting heavy arrangements, working long hours, probably skipping meals and ignoring chest pains, had taken its toll. "I need more time," she murmured, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Dr. Rodriguez, can you give me better visualization here?" As her team adjusted the retractors, Isabella's mind flashed back to that night at the diner. Marcus's weathered hands placing those $1,500 bills on the table. The same hands that had crafted thousands of beautiful arrangements, that had comforted his dying wife, that had trusted a crying waitress with his last hope. "First bypass graft is in place," she announced. "How are we looking, anesthesia?" "Stable for now, but his ejection fraction is still critically low," Dr. Patterson replied from behind his monitors. "We're pushing maximum pharmacological support." Isabella began work on the second vessel, her movements deliberate and precise. She had performed this procedure hundreds of times, but never had the stakes felt so personal. In the gallery above, she knew Linda was waiting, probably clutching her phone, maybe calling other family members with updates she didn't yet have. "Dr. Morales," Dr. Kim said quietly, "there's something you should know. The patient's apartment. When the paramedics found him, he was surrounded by photo albums and scrapbooks. Apparently, he'd been looking through them when the heart attack hit." Isabella's hand paused for just a moment. "What kind of scrapbooks?" "Pictures of flowers, newspaper clippings about the hospital, and—" Dr. Kim hesitated. "A lot of printed emails and letters. The daughter said they were all about you and your brother. Your medical school graduation, your residency match, your first surgery as an attending. He kept everything." The weight of that revelation settled over Isabella like a warm blanket. For 7 years, she had carried the memory of Marcus's kindness, but she had never realized that he had been carrying her journey with him too. "Second graft complete," she said, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't quite suppress. "Beginning work on the LAD, the left anterior descending artery, the widowmaker, the vessel that, when blocked, killed more people than any other single coronary artery." Isabella had lost patients here before, watched families crumble when this particular repair failed, but not tonight, not this patient. As she worked, Isabella began to talk, something she rarely did during surgery, but tonight felt different. "You know, Mr. Chen," she said softly, though Marcus was deeply sedated, "I kept my promise, every promise. Miguel finished his neurosurgery residency last month. He's starting a fellowship at Cleveland Clinic. He saves lives now, just like he always dreamed." Her hands continued their delicate work, removing plaque, creating new pathways for blood to flow. "And me? Well, you were right about the healer's hands. Last year I performed emergency surgery on a 12-year-old girl. Car accident, just like Miguel. Her name was Sarah." Isabella's voice caught slightly at the name. "Just like your wife. She's running track again now. Her parents send me pictures." "Dr. Morales?" Dr. Rodriguez interjected gently. "Heart rate is improving. BP coming up to 95/60. "That's it," Isabella whispered. "Fight, Marcus. The way you taught me to fight." She continued working, but the words kept coming, as if 7 years of gratitude had finally found its voice. "I named the scholarship after you," she said. "The Marcus Chen Foundation for Medical Students. We've helped 43 students so far, kids from backgrounds like mine, working multiple jobs, taking care of siblings, sleeping in their cars sometimes. Every one of them gets a white rose with their acceptance letter." Dr. Kim looked up from his monitors, a slight smile visible even behind his mask. "Final graft is in place," Isabella announced, "coming off bypass now." This was the moment of truth. After hours of redirecting blood flow through artificial channels, Marcus's heart would have to prove it could pump on its own again. Isabella watched the monitor as they gradually reduced the machine's support. The heart stuttered once, twice, then found its rhythm. "We have spontaneous rhythm," Dr. Patterson called out. "BP holding steady at 1 to 10/70. Isabella closed her eyes for just a moment, feeling the relief wash over her like a tide. Around her, the team began the careful process of closing, but she allowed herself one moment of pure gratitude. "Dr. Morales?" Dr. Kim's voice was soft. "There's something else. The patient's daughter asked me to tell you. He's been carrying something in his wallet for 7 years. A business card from Chen's Flowers. On the back he wrote, 'Isabella, my greatest investment.'" Tears she had been holding back for hours finally spilled over, but Isabella didn't wipe them away. Some tears were meant to fall. "Let's get him to recovery," she said. "Mr. Chen has a lot more living to do." As they wheeled Marcus toward the ICU, Isabella knew that this surgery had saved more than just a life. It had completed a circle that began with a single white rose and a stranger's faith in dreams. But the most important conversation was still to come. 3 days after the surgery, Isabella found Marcus sitting up in his hospital bed, looking out the window at the Baltimore skyline. The morning sun cast gentle shadows across his face, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly at peace. "Knock, knock," she said softly, carrying a small potted orchid, white, delicate, and resilient. Marcus turned, and his face lit up with the same warm smile she remembered from that night at the diner. "Dr. Isabella Morales," he said, emphasizing each word with pride. "My surgeon. I still can't believe it." "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling into the chair beside his bed and placing the orchid on his nightstand. "Like I've been given a second chance I didn't deserve," Marcus replied. "Linda told me what you said during the surgery. About the scholarship, about Miguel, about the girl named Sarah. I don't have words." Isabella reached into her white coat pocket and pulled out a small frame, the pressed white rose from that night 7 years ago. Marcus's eyes widened as he recognized it. "You kept it," he whispered. "Every day," Isabella said. "It sits on my desk, and every time I doubt myself, every time I think about giving up, I look at it and remember what you taught me about hope." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the pattern on his blanket. "I need to tell you something, Isabella. That night at the diner, I was planning to end my life." Isabella's breath caught, but she remained silent, understanding that this confession had been 7 years in the making. "I'd lost everything," Marcus continued. "The shop, my savings, my sense of purpose. Sarah had been gone for 3 years, and I couldn't see the point anymore. I was at that diner because I couldn't bear to be alone in my apartment, thinking about how I was going to say goodbye." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes as she listened. "But then, I saw you," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "This young woman, barely more than a girl really, fighting so hard for someone she loved. working herself to the bone, sacrificing everything but still believing that somehow, some way things could get better. You reminded me of why I fell in love with Sarah in the first place, that fierce determination to protect the people you care about. Mr. Chen, Marcus, he corrected gently. Please, and let me finish. He smiled. When I gave you that money, I wasn't just helping you. I was saving myself, because suddenly I had a reason to wake up tomorrow. I had someone to root for. I had hope again. Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I tried to pay you back so many times, and I sent every check back because you already had paid me back, Marcus said. Every letter you wrote, every update about school, every milestone you shared, that was my payment. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you believe in achieve everything you dreamed they could? Actually, Isabella said with a small smile, I think I do now. Marcus laughed, a rich, genuine sound that filled the room with warmth. Linda showed me the scrapbooks, Isabella continued. 7 years of my life carefully preserved. Medical school graduation photos, newspaper clippings from the hospital newsletter, even printouts of my published research papers. You kept it all. Of course I did, Marcus said simply. You were my proof that miracles are real, that sometimes when you give someone a chance, they don't just meet your expectations, they exceed your wildest dreams. Isabella stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I need to tell you something too, she said. That night changed everything for me, but not just because of the money. It was the first time in my life that someone looked at me and saw potential instead of problems. You saw a doctor when I was just a scared waitress. You saw strength when I felt completely broken. She turned back to face him. Do you know how many times I've thought about that moment during the hardest parts of medical school? During my internship, when I was making life and death decisions and terrified I wasn't smart enough or strong enough? Every time I would remember you saying, because that's who you are, and I would find a way to keep going. And look at you now, Marcus said, his voice full of wonder. Dr. Isabella Morales, cardiac surgeon, saving lives, training residents, running a foundation. You've become everything I saw in you that night and so much more. We both have, Isabella said. Because you know what I realized during your surgery? You didn't just give me money that night. You gave me the gift of believing I was worth investing in. And now 7 years later, I got to give you the gift of a second chance at life. Marcus nodded, understanding passing between them like a current. The Marcus Chen Foundation, he said with a smile. Linda told me about it. 43 students. 47 now, Isabella corrected. We just awarded 4 more scholarships last month. Each one gets a white rose with their acceptance letter and a card that says, beautiful things can grow even in the darkest soil. Sarah would have loved that, Marcus said softly. I think she did love it, Isabella replied. I think somehow she was there that night at the diner, guiding you to give a stranger a flower when she needed it most. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the morning light dance across the hospital room walls. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Isabella smiled, the same determined smile she'd worn as a 22-year-old waitress refusing to give up on her dreams. Now you recover, go home to Linda and your grandchildren, and live the second chance you gave yourself when you chose hope over despair, she said. And I keep saving lives, keep running the foundation, and keep that white rose on my desk as a reminder that the most powerful medicine in the world is believing in someone else's potential. And we stay in touch? Marcus asked hopefully. Marcus Chen, Isabella said, taking his hand in hers. You're not just a patient anymore, you're family. And family doesn't say goodbye. Family says, see you soon. And now that you've made it this far, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your presence matters, and your story does too. As Isabella prepared to leave for her next surgery, she paused at the door to look back at Marcus, who was carefully positioning the white orchid where the morning light could reach it. The flower that had started as a symbol of hope had grown into a garden of dreams fulfilled, lives saved, and the unbreakable bond between two people who had learned that sometimes the most important investments we make are in each other. The circle was complete, but the story would continue forever in every life they touched, every dream they helped nurture, and every moment they chose hope over despair. After all, beautiful things can grow even in the darkest soil.